Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Happy Easter.
Happy
Easter. It's good to see all of you the week after Easter. Thank you so much for being here. Absolutely. I'm just really grateful that Dr. Nelson Rivera, who is an associate professor of theology, something.
Yeah, officially of doctrinal theology.
Doctrinal theology.
Just theology. They don't even know what it means. I'm kidding.
At Moravian Seminary. Dr. Rivera and I actually crossed paths many moons ago. We were at seminary at the same time, although he was just a child when we were there. Very grateful that he's with us today and has many gifts. And I said, speak about whatever you want today, theology and life, which actually is kind of, he was talking about theology and resurrection, I think, but also is going to just tell us a little bit about himself and life at Moravian. So whatever you want to do at Moravian Seminary, and this group will ask tons of questions, so
Unopened.
and I will disappear for a second, but I'll be right back, I promise. I promised I would abandon him this morning, but so my thanks for Dr. Rivera for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I haven't said a word yet. You may take it back later. So much is happening in this place at the same time. I'm just being taken from one place to another very quickly.
And if you want to sit, that's okay too.
Oh, no, thank you. I may fall asleep listening to myself now. And there are some surprises along the way. Father Barry told me via text, this is how we communicate nowadays. Right. Oh, by the way, there's an adult forum. Say whatever you want. That's too risky. But anyway, he asked me on the one hand to say something about where I am, about Moravian Seminary and my ministry. But I said to him, it's Easter season. Let's speak something about the resurrection. So I'll ask you a couple of questions and see what you say. But first, I've been at Moravian Theological Seminary. Have you been there at all literally to the building, or do you know people from the Moravian faculty or staff? Actually, one of them I saw worshiping, Marcela. Marcela is also a teacher there, part of the staff. That was a very nice, beautiful surprise. Probably she mentioned to me before where she worshiped, but I have forgotten. I was like, oh my God.
We had a couple of your students that came to the Bethlehem Emergency Shelter during the season, which was really nice, and ministered to our residents. And that was a real pleasure to have them there.
By any chance, do you remember any names?
I'm trying to remember. I think one was Tom.
Okay.
I remember what they look like. Put it that way. We have so many. I can't remember the other jobs.
Don't worry. I didn't bring any pictures, so I didn't. Yeah. And then also, Father Barry said that Jane Williams, I think, she's a member also here. Yeah. And she was my colleague during my first year. And actually, when I began, which was the fall of 2017, she was on sabbatical that semester. So I actually interacted more with her during the spring of 2018. And then she retired, so we didn't have a lot of time. But of course, we keep touch now and then through email. So anyway, this is my 5th year. I'm completing my 5th year at Moravian. And I am the one who teaches everything in theology, except Moravian theology, because I'm a Lutheran. I'm an evangelical Lutheran church in America. And it's quite an honor that they called me, offered me the job to teach in what is called systematic theology normally, but they call it actually doctrinal theology, because the task is to teach students all the classic topics in Christian thought. For example, God and creation. This semester I'm teaching Christology. In the summer, I'll be teaching a class on the meaning of church. The title is Word, Spirit, and Sacraments, which to me that's the definition of what church is. And also Intro to Theology, of course, a class that I didn't teach before, but I'm required to teach at Moravian is Christian Ethics, and I really love it. I mean, I have my readings in ethics, I have taken ethics as a student before, but I was never asked to teach it. And when I got to Moravian, oh, by the way, you're teaching also Christian ethics. Oh, no, okay. And I love it. It's one of my favorite classes, and I'm teaching that this semester as well. And really the only person again in theology said that they have one for Moravian, another one person for Moravian theology and history, and a person for Moravian liturgy, preaching, etc. So they have two Moravians, or three, we count the dean is also Moravian. 3 Moravians in the faculty. We're only 7 faculty at Moravian Seminary. As you know, the seminary is embedded in the university, so we are a school of the university. They have the School of Humanities and Social Sciences and the School of Natural Sciences and Health Sciences. Well, then they have the seminary. Something that's happening, and this is just the last few months, is that Lancaster Theological Seminary in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which was founded by the German Reformed Church in Pennsylvania, and that became part of what is called United Church of Christ, UCC, to this day, asked to join us, to merge with us. So we are in the process that will last probably another 2 years into the future of joining the faculty and some of the staff and resources and student body, of course, of Lancaster Theological Seminary with Moravian Seminary, while keeping both places or both campuses. We're still in that process. So there is my counterpart. There is a theology professor at Lancaster, and we are already in conversations because eventually there will be one curriculum for the 2 schools, right? As we merge the 2 schools. So that's basically,
Could you remind me the difference between UCC,
United Church of Christ,
United Church, and Universal?
Oh, Unitarian Universalist. It's interesting because sometimes people confuse them, and I blame the UCC for the confusion sometimes. But they are very different. For example, let's call it Unitarian Universalist, UU, which is a merge of 2 groups, the Universalists and the Unitarians. Each one brought something. Because, for example, the Universalist aspect is belief in universal salvation. Universal salvation is the belief that at the end, everybody's safe. So, see, universal salvation. Universal salvation is not what you may call core of mainstream Christianity. You know, we believe in the mercies of God. We leave to God the last word. But the universalist, and then the Unitarian is non-Trinitarian. Yeah? So the UU do not uphold to the triune God or to the doctrine of the Trinity. That's why they are Unitarian. So Jesus is not divine. It's excellent, and they follow Jesus and they proclaim Jesus, but it's not. I mean, Jesus was chosen by God for a special task, and of course, bestow on Jesus special gifts, etc., powers, knowledge. But Unitarian is only one Unitarian perception of who God is, not a Trinitarian identity. So when you bring the Unitarians and the Universalists, it's a very interesting mix, but there they are. UCC is a Trinitarian church, like we are, like many others. Episcopalian, Lutheran, Presbyterian, everybody, Methodist. But the thing about UCC that I said that creates confusion is that they say that they are not a creedal Christianity, meaning that they do not, I just say, attach themselves firmly to one creed. So they allow congregations to, in a sense, write their own statements of faith or their own creed. I mean, they are committed to basic principles like Jesus is the Son of God, and God is the Creator, and the Holy Spirit has been sent by the promise of Jesus to us. So many things, but there is a lot of freedom. So they don't have like a very centralized form of government like Episcopalians and Lutherans and Presbyterians and Methodists have. So they're more loose in the sense of rules. I don't mean in the sense of ethics. So there are differences. Just one is Trinitarian and the other not. That's a huge difference already, right? Yeah, but actually, you know how many times I have been called, so how's things going at Mennonite Seminary? And you're like, Moravian. So, I mean, people, but that's a good question. Did I answer? Did I help?
Yes, but
You said that they are a religion of humanity. They call themselves.
right. So I've also heard that anything goes. Like
I wouldn't put it that way, of course, with anybody, but
Unitarian. I didn't actually think about the word Unitarian.
yeah, it's non-Trinitarian, but
Well,
Unitarian sounds better.
But even in Genesis, there is a we created, or
Yeah.
we.
Yeah.
There's a plural even in Genesis.
Yeah, they don't deny the existence of Jesus or the Spirit because they don't have a full-fledged Trinitarian doctrine or teaching. That took time in Christianity. The foundations are in the New Testament, of course, but a full-fledged statement about what do we mean by a triune God had to wait until like the beginning of the 4th century.
So next week I'll ask you to explain the triune God. Thank you very much.
Okay. And I have no trouble whatsoever because I won't be here next week. So please bring your question next week.
And you can take his class.
Sir?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi everybody, my name is Jordan Fisher. I just recently went to the library and I actually got a book about the finding of the Gospel of Judas. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it turns what we have down in the Gospels on its side. It's completely opposite.
There's the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, of which we only have like a few
It was Judas.
pieces.
It was Judas.
The Gospel of Judas.
It was Judas Iscariot, the one that betrayed Jesus, but it depicts it in a different, from a different light. I consider it blasphemous, I guess, because it says, because the things it says in it, it says Judas was not necessarily a traitor, but Jesus' closest, and it actually dates back to the timing of slightly before the other accounts by Mark, Matthew, and Luke.
Yeah, that's doubtful, and that's the debate of scholars,
Right.
historians and New Testament scholars and others. From the first 2 centuries, probably more, but let's just stick to the first 2 centuries. Beginning, say, if Jesus died roughly in the year 30 of what we call the first century.
Yeah.
And the earliest writings that we know of are some of Paul's letters.
From 60.
Before that, the earliest of Paul's letters is probably from the year 49. So just like 19 years after Jesus' crucifixion. So from 49, and even before, because there were a collection of sayings of Jesus that were incorporated into the Gospels that we know, Matthew, Luke, Mark, St. John, etc. And those came later. So from there, say from the year 4950 of the first century up to close to the year 200, the end of the 2nd century, there were other writings, many writings, letters, gospels, books of Revelation, etc. And by different names. There was a process that took a long time of judging, assessing, analyzing the writings. There were different criteria. For example, how many congregations were using across the world known then. So, for example, the Gospel of Luke, how many congregations were using it, the Gospel of Mark. The more they copy and share, the more it was put to good use, the better the chances to make it into the canon, the official list of books. And the first official list of the canonical books in the New Testament comes from the year 367. So that's past mid-4th century by a Bishop Athanasius. But anyway, so it's a long process of different congregations, different churches in different cities using different gospels, different letters. Eventually, many of those, Gospel of Thomas or Judas, Mary Magdalene, the Shepherd of Hermas, the Gospel of Peter, the Revelation of Peter, or given to Peter instead of the Revelation of John, and many others that I don't remember their names now. Kind of the attention faded. They didn't make it to the. Now there are, again, the criteria of, are they related to the apostolic ministry of some apostles, whether Paul or John or the others. They prefer the oldest writings. Are they good for teaching and preaching and counseling in the church? So these things were put to the test. So there are probably, if we count all of the writings that were left of the canon of the New Testament, we probably have like 2 or 3 times the strength of the New Testament. So now, one more thing. Many of these writings were considered Gnostic in character. Gnosticism was really the greatest challenge. You may think persecution, well, yeah, of course, violence, but from within the church, internally to the church, Gnosticism, Gnostic ideas was the greatest challenge, because it's still, we have it to this day. A lot of what people believe are Christian teachings are really Gnostic understandings. So among the Gnostic understanding was that the flesh, the body of Jesus was not true flesh and blood, but it looked like. The church through the century have rejected that idea. In St. John already we have what they call the struggle with proto-Gnostic ideas, because it emphasized that Jesus, the reason why could even eat fish and be touched, etc., like, is for real. So the Gospel of Thomas is the quintessential Gnostic gospel, and then some aspect of the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, of which we only have bits and pieces, loose pages, and then Judas or whoever. They are later, and they are very influenced by Gnostic ideas that the church struggled with and rejected one by one, but they have a way of always coming back with a vengeance. So, what are Gnostic ideas? The immortality of the soul. That's not a teaching of Christianity. It's the resurrection of the body. Jesus' flesh only looked like. It's called docetism, from the Greek word for appearance. Looked like, but it wasn't. So, docetism was rejected as a Gnostic idea. That Jesus really didn't die on the cross, which eventually influenced Islam. That's why in Islam there is no death of Jesus on the cross. Influenced by those Gnostic ideas that survived for centuries, that Jesus didn't really die on the cross. Many other ideas that were rejected. And that's writing like that one and many others were eventually
I think
rejected.
I should use something like that as, you know.
They're called historical documents to understand something about what was going on. Yeah.
Because for me, you know, I'll just make this quick. I'm sorry to take up so much time. There's three accounts: Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Of the resurrection, and they are all a little different. They have, when it comes to like Judas and receiving 30 pieces of silver. In one account, he gives the money back. In another account, the money's taken from him, and they buy a field of blood for the they're slightly different.
Yeah, and they acknowledge that, like Luke acknowledges that he's not the first one to put in writing the story, and then he said, I have researched, I have talked to witnesses. That's what he starts saying. And Luke actually, we believe, wrote also the Acts of the Apostles. So it's a two-volume work where he says that he has investigated these things. So of course you expect Luke to be longer, to add more details. Now we know Mark is, most scholars agree, Mark of the Gospels, not of all the writings of the Gospel, is the earliest. They said between the year 66 and 70. Therefore, a happy medium, most said 68, between 66 and 70. And so it's shorter, and a lot of Mark is in Luke and Matthew.
Right.
Now, John is different, and there are several reasons that have been proposed why it's different. Some people say, because he was the beloved disciple. Probably he knew more about Jesus.
Yeah,
but it probably had more to do with the fact that Johannine Christianity was farther from the centers like Jerusalem and Antioch, those ancient sites of Christian development. The oldest sites that we know, Jerusalem, Antioch, etc. That the Johannine community probably was somewhere of what we call today Syria. So it was farther. So that distance with other Christian communities, they had other stories to tell, and they keep repeating, and then they put them in writing. And so it's different for different reasons.
And the reason I bring it up is because there's, so many denominations of Christianity. Mm-hmm. Like, so I'm local to the area now, and there's a group of Mormons that, they preach out on the street. Now, I read the book of Mormon now, and that talks about, a revelation that was had in the 1820s by John something or other. And for me, I'm just asking this, because collectively, how should I take in all this information? Like
Mormonism, and they are not alone. There are so many what I call homegrown religions in the American context. Mormonism is just one big example.
So some of that stuff's not.
But there's so many.
It's not necessarily doctrinal.
Yeah, and they have their own scriptures. They use Bible, but they have their own full book of Mormon. That is, very different.
For me, it's just hard for me to say. Well, I don't say to people, your religion is wrong. Your belief is wrong. I don't really argue that at all. I won't engage in any kind of arguing with anyone about it. But in my opinion, that's not the doctrine I follow.
Yeah, no, me neither. No, what I'm saying is that it's a homegrown American religion, like many others. They are not alone. I have a student who did a paper for a history class, not for my theology class, for a history class on the founding, origins, evolution, and present-day circumstances of the Satanic Temple, another homegrown American religion, which is considered now a religion. They claim to have 10,000 followers across the United States. There's so many American religions besides Christianity that we could go on for a month non-stop talking about many of those. Thank you. Others?
So, after being in seminary or teaching seminarians, what's the mood these days in seminary?
The mood.
Church is not what it used to be. It's not something everybody does, and especially after the last 2 years of lots of people just stopping going. Are seminarians interested in doctrine, or are they thinking, how can I get people through a church door, regardless of what the doctrine is?
Wow, do we have time? Wow, I mean,
Well, I mean,
let
there's
me,
the reality of church
Yes.
and there's the academics. of
indeed,
church.
that in the back of our minds all the time. I mean, I've been 5 years at Moravian, but I was 17 years at Lutheran Seminary in Philadelphia. And before that, 2 years as an adjunct at the Evangelical Seminary in Puerto Rico. I come from Puerto Rico. I was already a Lutheran pastor then. And I've seen the changes. I'm not alone, of course. That so-called mainline denominations, like more traditional denominations, they keep losing numbers. I mean, it's true. The Evangelical Lutheran Church in America was officially formed of a merger of 3 different Lutheran bodies, and it began officially in January 1988. Officially, January 1st, 1988. So it's what, 34 years old, roughly? And at the beginning, January 1st, 88, had 5.2 million members. 5.2 million. As of last year, we have 3.3. So basically, 2 million members less in 34 years.
That's just here in the US?
That's the ELCA. And I know, believe it or not, you may think that disciples of Christ, because they're more evangelical in a sense, that they're faring better. No, not really. That trend began today. By the 90s, they have lost like 50% of their membership, disciples of Christ. So it's happening across the board. I don't know what's the case right now with the Episcopal Church.
Dropping dramatically.
Look at that. And there are many reasons for that. One of the reasons is that church attendance, let's call it massive church attendance, was the contest for that was after the war, especially in the 50s. In the 50s, all churches really grew tremendously. And since the 60s, they have been actually losing members. But what has happened now in the 21st century, last decade of the 20th and 21st, is the acceleration with which we are losing members numbers. Now, there are several reasons. One reason, of course, and I don't want to say too loudly, well, people die. Right? And we don't seem to be adding numbers.
That would be their body or their spirit?
I'm afraid probably both. We don't see them any longer until the time of the kingdom. It's second, families, less children. I mean, the last time I looked, and this is like more than a decade ago, they say that the average so-called American Anglo family, young family, have 1.6 children. Since we don't know of 1.6 children, many have one, others have two, I guess. Or if some have three, others have none. So 1.6. Now among Hispanics is 3.7. And this is like 10 years ago. It may have increased actually. So again, social trends, what is called, what's the word for that? Not geography, the numbers, period, the numbers, population number, etc. Then you mentioned something about doctrine, and that's a debate. Some people would say, we're not teaching people what even the Christian faith is all about. What do we believe? Why do we do what we do? We just, because we don't want to scare them. We don't want to impose anything. We want them to feel that they can believe whatever as far as they are here to count the numbers. That's one argument. So Another argument says, but that's exactly what we should be doing. Other no, we should be teaching them well or not teach. It's just an open debate. Barry, you have your hand up.
Well, again, I mean, it's the question about what is the church supposed to do? And theology is about engaging people in the issues of the day in relationship to God, and that's a complicated walk to walk. And that's that conversation about, are we teaching people, or are we just worried about keeping the numbers up and having people come to the door? That's the perennial debate these days.
Are people enthusiastic about being here? And I don't mean you, I mean other people, like bringing others, like sharing that enthusiasm, so to say. And again, this is a long topic. There are many writings about it, so there's a long list of reasons, or perceived reasons, or suggested reasons why is this happening. But it's so that, say, Episcopalians or Lutherans do not feel so bad, because I mean we're not alone. I mean it's kind of a half consolation, right? But we're not alone. It's happening across the board, so to say, on denomination. So there are social trends, maybe even economic ones. Who knows? Political ones, unfortunately.
I always wondered, because it was a struggle for me. My daughter struggled in school. She loved her sport. For me to get her to do the sports, it was always in conflict with Sunday. They did a lot of sports things. Well, my solution was I enrolled her in a Christian school. This way she had church every day, they had chapel every day, she stayed in touch with God, and that way she could have her weekend. But I wasn't Lutheran. There were no night services that the family could go together. I find this church interesting because they keep expanding on what they offer in time, as well as spiritual ways of worshiping and music and things like that, which is, to me, I thought some of that was the death of my own church. And I'm an ex-Lutheran. I don't know if I can be an ex-Lutheran. I can come to the Episcopal Church and embrace
See, you
this.
can.
But yeah, I don't know that you can ever take a Lutheran away from Lutheranism. Anyway, but I always found that part of the death of my own church. The church that I went to literally shut down. It was shut down about 5 years ago. It's so hard for me to drive by it. It's now in town at 15th and Turner. And I go, what a church, what a place I grew up in, what a wonderful family that was to me. But because my daughter, I used to take her, but they only had a Sunday morning service.
Yeah.
And I think some of the churches are forgetting, it's not right that you don't make time for God. But still in all, when you have a child and that's your little string to keep them going in school, it was what I kept her going in school. What was my alternative to turn her over to a Christian school?
Distraction. A lot of they are happening. There was a time, right, commerce had to close on Sunday, then it couldn't open before noontime. That's gone. Everything. I don't have a specific position. I'm just saying
I know.
all of these happen, and all the games and all the activities and all the clubs and all the distractions. So there's so many reasons, media reasons, why this has been happening. And it didn't start yesterday. It's been happening now for 4 decades or more.
Many years ago, maybe 20 years ago, I stumbled onto a radio broadcast. It was probably like a public radio station. It wasn't some kind of thing that was not well informed. A discussion of the Orthodox churches that are actually growing. And so that they started to try to figure out why this was. And the answer was that a big factor in that was that 20 years before then, the evangelical churches were working very hard to get kids out of organizations in college. And so they went into the evangelical churches, and as they became more mature, they said to themselves, there must be more to it than just what's being offered here. And they began shopping around, and they hit on the Orthodox churches.
By Orthodox, you mean like Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, Bulgarian Orthodox, not Orthodox in another more traditional sense.
No, there were,
Okay.
yeah. Churches.
Yeah. They're by wave. I mean, most Orthodox churches are like national parishes, meaning Greek, Bulgarian Orthodox, Ukrainian, etc., Romania. What? So the Syria, though, imagine that now. And actually, what I know is that, for example, Presbyterian have earned Orthodox people, like Syrian Orthodox, have become many Presbyterian. So I don't know today. Actually, I just read last week in the New York Times that Russian Orthodox churches are taking a hit because the patriarch Cyril, his name, in Russia, has basically put all his support on the war on Ukraine. And there and in other places, people are stopping attending because they're very upset by that. So, what are going to be the consequences 5 years down the road? Hard to say. But that was just an article last week in the New York Times. They're taking a big hit. So, but I don't know that would affect Greek Orthodox. It's a different one, right? They share many things in common, but they use their own languages, etc., right? I know Ukrainian Orthodox and Ukrainian Catholics who are Byzantine Rite. You know, they follow the Eastern Rite, but they have communion with the Pope. So they are Ukrainian Catholic of Byzantine Rite. I know them well.
Where I read about that was that these Orthodox churches that are now in communion with the Pope were, after the Turks conquered Constantinople, they lost their connection because of the politics that was between them and the Orthodox bishop. They were just physically cut off, but they wanted some higher authority. So they went to the Pope and asked him if he would take them in, and he did.
Yeah, officially speaking, the Catholic Church, Roman Catholic Church, acknowledge, I think there are 5 patriarchs. By patriarch, they mean heads of Orthodox churches who are in communion with the Bishop of Rome. They keep their own worship style and rituals, etc. And one of them, again, is Ukrainian Catholics. They are in communion with the Bishop of Rome. But there are 5, Syrian, Ukrainian, I think Romanian. There are 5. I don't remember all of them now. But they have been in communion for sometimes for a few centuries. In some cases, they lost the contact and then was renewed again. For Ukrainians, it was renewed early in the 20th century or something, if I recall well. So anyway, there are like 5 of those Orthodox churches. But officially speaking, the Greek or Russian Orthodox churches are not in communion with Rome. There is an excommunication of Orthodox churches to the Bishop of Rome and the Catholic Church since the 11th century, and it hasn't been removed. Now, this Pope has met with Orthodox authorities, whether in person or through video conference, with several Orthodox heads, so to say. And I guess there's a very good will trying to do something about it. But you know, as they say, Rome thinks in centuries. And that has 2 aspects. On the one hand, Rome has a lot of experience. Being around for so long, it doesn't rush into anything, you know. On the other hand, that's precisely part of the problem. They don't rush into anything. So when they start now, it may you may see the fruits 30, 40, 50 years from now. meaning we won't probably see it. So, yeah, but officially, like the head of Greek and the head of Russia, they are not in communion with Rome. They were the ones, the Greek, boom, that excommunicated the Catholic Church because of a dispute, among other things, over the Nicene Creed, which I noticed today that
Yes.
we are following the Orthodox understanding. Is there? I'm not critical about that at all. I'm just saying, is there a reason?
Well, at 8 o'clock, I think you noticed we used the new
Okay.
Church of England adaptation, which eliminates
Of the sun.
Right.
Ah, okay. Oh, that explains it.
At 321, we were traditional. I have no clue what you're getting at 10:30.
Okay. Oh, just in case people don't know what I'm talking about, is that the Nicene Creed comes originally from the 4th century. It was a gathering of, I don't remember how many, but there were more than 100 Orthodox bishops and 3 from the Latin Church at the time. So guess who won the argument? So they wrote a creed, what is called the Nicene Creed, which was revised like 50 years later in the Council of Constantinople. And then that's why the Nicene Creed should be called the Niceno-Constantinopolitan Creed, but that's too long. But then in Spain, in the 4th, 5th century, people noticed that there was an addition. Some attribute that to a guy, John of Sevilla or whatever, who knows? I wasn't there. But that when it says that the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father, and then in the West, and the Son. And I noticed this morning that all churches in the West, Catholic and beyond, say the Holy Spirit who proceeds from the Father and the Son. And I was like, from the Father, I was going to say the Son, like, it's not there. Oh, okay, interesting. Revolutionary.
Church of England, maybe 15 years ago now already, the new Church of England prayer book came out, and so it's part of the Anglican community.
You think it's a fruit of conversations with Orthodox churches?
Absolutely.
Okay, look at that. See, and I didn't know. I had not noticed
It's
until
an
this
option.
morning. Oh, it's optional. So that's what we're talking about, yeah. But besides here, and I don't know, oh, well, the Anglican Communion now. Lutherans and others we're behind. We're still using who proceed from the Father and the Son. But actually, there's a German theologian who is Reformed who actually said, we need to solve the impasse over the Nicene Creed between Orthodox churches or Eastern and Latin churches, Roman Catholicism, and all the heirs ourselves of Roman Catholicism. And let's, instead of saying the Holy Spirit who proceeds from the Father or the Holy Spirit who proceeds from the Father and the Son, let's say the Holy Spirit who proceeds from the Father of the Son. Okay, kind of happy medium. The proposal is still on the table with the World Council of Churches. It may be an elegant solution after all.
And so this is exactly the question about theology versus the person who's in the pew, and why does it matter? And that's the question that we need to invite people to constantly engage in.
Yeah.
What is this conversation about? What does it mean?
Yeah.
What does it mean?
It has meaning, and I would like to say something about that. A good point, but I think you have your hand.
This is just very quick. First of all, I heard from an Orthodox priest that Orthodoxism was something that Luther considered.
There was a exchange of letters
Yeah.
between Lutheran theologians in Wittenberg at the time, especially Luther's colleague, Philip Melanchthon, and Orthodox authorities of the 16th century. Yes. And therefore, now in the dialogue between Lutherans and Orthodox, an ongoing conversation, that's one of the first things that came on the table. Oh, there were these exchange of letters. What can we learn from that we can actually apply today, etc.?
And here's just a little thing that Barry, I'm sure knows. But if you look around like some Episcopal churches, everyone's like gonna find a prayer book that has on the front or the proposed prayer book. The creed in there is the one that y'all said at 8 o'clock, the one without the filioque.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
You see what she said? She said it in Latin, the filioque. That's an extra point for her.
No, I just said, my other priest was just really kind of into that.
Oh.
Yeah, but every once in a great while, you'll find one.
Yeah.
Right, you have the proposed, because it wasn't,
Yeah.
Oh, the proposed.
it wasn't
Yeah.
official.
Just in case, it's called the filioque because filio is son, que means and. So in Latin it comes together, and son. Filioque. Very good.
So the wonderful news is that I love theology, and he's really close, and I'm more than happy to continue these conversations. The bad news is that we have to go.
Okay.
But many thanks. And I'm going to whisk him away because we have to get to the next start.
That's in the 16th century. That was like the Catholic answer to the Reformation, to the Protestant Reformation. Luther and the others were asking for a council to debate the question of but the council actually didn't have such a niche 16th century. So I recall well, I was 1545 and 1546. And Luther died actually in 1550.